Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Tanks with the mighty Jingles. And we've got two battles for you today, both of them on Ensk, and the reason we've got two battles for you today is pretty much because both of them are on Ensk. As I'm sure you're all aware, it's certainly possible to have a battle in World of Tanks last anything up to 15 minutes, but it's usually over a lot sooner than that. I believe 8 minutes is the average. And while I certainly don't have access to anything as specific as details and numbers to prove otherwise, I get the distinct impression that battles on Ensk in particular tend to be over even faster than that, because it is a quite small map, and due to the way it's laid out, the combat engagements tend to take place at extremely close range. So we've got a double battle bonanza for you today here on Ensk, the first one starring Maniac 2000 here, in the Tier 10 Soviet, allegedly medium tank, the Object 430U. And I say allegedly medium because the U in this tank's name means strengthened. It was basically a Soviet attempt to see just how much like a heavy tank they could get away with making a medium tank and still calling it a medium. This thing is incredibly well armoured for a medium tank, particularly in the turret and the upper glacis, while still retaining that medium tank mobility and with a much bigger gun than typically found on equivalent Soviet medium. Yep, this is a medium tank with a Soviet 122mm gun. It's a variation on the M62 122mm gun that you find on the IS-4. So it's got that heavy tank gun, and it's also, in many ways, got that heavy tank armour, particularly on the turret, which boasts 300mm of armour at the front, and the cupolas, which are normally a weak spot, on this thing are actually even quite resistant to premium ammunition. The sides are covered in spaced armour, and the upper glacis at the front is 160mm thick, as well as being sloped and angled. This tank's turret remains formidable under any circumstances, but the upper glacis against Tier 10 tank destroyers, like the Jaeger down there, 160mm upper glacis is not much of a challenge, and can be penetrated by almost every Tier 10 vehicle, even if it is not a Tier 10 tank destroyer, if they fire gold ammunition. The 430U is an extremely tough tank by medium tank standards, particularly if it's fighting Tier 8s and 9s, which really struggle doing any kind of damage to this machine from the front, regardless of how many times they swipe Daddy's credit card through the gold ammunition dispenser. Well, surely the Tier 8s and 9s can just outmaneuver it and shoot it through that spaced armour in the side. Well, you'd think so, but despite the fact that this tank has heavy tank armour and a heavy tank gun, and an engine only half as powerful as the engine on, for example, the IS-7, it still manages to zip around the battlefield at 50 km per hour. Wait, what? How can this be, Jingles? Well, the short answer to that is it couldn't. That's why the actual Soviet engineers who were tasked with developing this tank gave up and built the T-64 instead. But here it is in World of Tanks, because unlike the real engineers, the guys at Wargaming don't have to worry about coming up with a transmission and suspension that can take that amount of weight and still propel this tank around the battlefield at the same speeds as a tank like the Centurion, which for some strange reason seems to weigh more despite having half the armour and a smaller gun. Yes, the Object 430U is another magical mystery bullshit tank, powered by vodka, pixie dust, and the crushed hopes and dreams of 3 entire generations of Soviet proletariat. Or, to put it another way, it's a very good tank. Particularly when it's fighting Tier 8s and 9s, which Maniac 2000 isn't doing in this battle. Every single tank on both teams is Tier 10. Although that 60 TP is not going to be a problem for very much longer, as Maniac was expertly, it has to be said, using his spaced armour and tracks to basically troll him into shooting completely ineffectually at his side. Oh, he nearly got blocked there by the Kranwagen behind him, who's had his tracks blown off, but managed to survive the encounter. I mean, seriously, who comes around the corner sideways on in front of machines like that? And there goes the Jaeger. Yeah, this is not a great place for fixed turret tank destroyers to be fighting. Close quarters like this, when you don't have a turret, this is just asking to die, particularly when your medium and heavy tank support has evaporated around you. Yeah, these two are dead. It's just a question of who's going to do the damage and who's going to get the kills. See, the other Jaeger was aiming for his lower glacis, but didn't reload in time. The Object 268 V4 puts a shot into his tracks. Another magical mystery bullshit tank. Did you notice that even aiming at his weak spots, he wasn't guaranteed to penetrate them with regular ammunition? But he's about to die, and the Jaeger is going to be next. Notice him side-scraping around the corner against the Jaeger. The Jaegeru has a gun that can overmatch, easily overmatch, his 50mm of side armour. Doing that in, for example, an American tank with its 50mm of side armour would have been suicidal if the Jaegeru had chosen to shoot, but, well, American tanks don't have that 50mm of side armour covered with spaced armour, do they? No, they don't, do they? In fact, some American Tier 10 heavies don't even have 50mm of side armour. Yes, T-57 Heavy, we're looking at you. Artillery seems to be in trouble. This really is a horrible map for artillery. Maniac's heading back to assist, but the Progetto is guaranteed to kill him, and, well, complaining about the problems suffered by artillery is unlikely to elicit much in the way of sympathetic comments in this game. I think the Progetto would have probably been better served running away rather than trying to fight him, even though he managed to bounce Maniac's first shot, because Maniac is not alone. There is a... yeah, well, they call it a T100LT, but it's a T64. And the Progetto is dead. Somebody's capping. Despite this, the team are actually losing, although they have managed to equalise the scores, as the enemy team stubbornly insist on trying to win by capping out. God damn it, if it worked once, it'll work every time. Yeah, not necessarily. There was a Gorilla 15 in the cap circle. I don't think he was actually trying to cap, I think he was just moving through it. You don't want to be sitting in an exposed cap circle in a machine with armour like that. Enemy T-57 Heavies just killed their Object 140. Enemy team are ahead again. 4 against 5, although one of the 5 is a batch out 15558, which is not terribly useful on a map like Ensk, so it's still anybody's game. IS-4 looks like he could use some help. There's that T-57 Heavy. Puts a shot into him, gets his tracks blown off in return. No further damage. And then the Type 5 Heavy unloads a high explosive shell into him, and if you had... really? What the hell did the Gorilla 15 think that was going to accomplish? Well, there goes the IS-4. But seriously, if you had any doubts about how effective the Object 430U's frontal armour is, the fact that a Type 5 Heavy just unloaded a high explosive shell into the front of this machine, and this medium tank's frontal armour mitigated 2/3 of the potential damage output from a Japanese Tier 10 heavy tank's 150mm gun, look no further. Hello, Mr. Batchat. Yeah, you should definitely reverse out so that we can shoot you. And then, you know what? You should probably do it again. I know the Batchat's pretty quick in reverse, but nobody's that quick. And the scores are still even. Well, at least on paper. I mean, 3 tanks each, but the enemy team has an artillery, which is not much use on this map. And Maniac's team have, well, Maniac, who's technically in a medium, but is really in a very, very fast heavy, a TVP, and a T100LT, which is technically a light tank, but it's as much a light tank as this thing is a medium tank. It's basically a T64. It's perhaps worth pointing out that any other medium tank under these circumstances would almost certainly already be dead. He's making extremely effective use of the dead S-tank in front of him as cover, but what he can't hide behind the S-tank are his cupolas. So he would be dead if he wasn't in an Object 430U. Even the Type 5 Heavy can hit your cupola at that kind of range, but, well, the cupolas on this thing actually have like 250mm of armour, rounded and shaped armour, so you effectively need something with around 300mm of penetration to get through them. Unless you manage to hit them square on, but you solve that problem by just never sitting still. And as quickly as that, this particular battle on Ensk is over. I told you, they don't last very long, do they? A very creditable performance there from Maniac 2000 in the, admittedly, magical mystery bullshit Object 430U, with 6 kills and over 9,000 damage done, and more than 2,000 damage blocked by his armour. And I know what the comments are going to be like. Yeah, I'd like to see you do that in a Leopard or a Centurion. I'm sure everybody would like to see somebody do that in a Leopard or a Centurion. But we don't know that Maniac couldn't do that in a Leopard or a Centurion. Alright, he's not going to be blocking 2,200 damage with his armour in a Leopard or a Centurion, but he would have had to play the map differently. Probably still wouldn't have gotten anything like as good a result as this, because let's face it, if there's a map that the Object 430U in particular is going to be particularly effective on, it's going to be something like Ensk. Well, next we're going to take it down a few gears. Actually, we're going to take it down a lot of gears to Tier 4, although this is technically a Tier 5 battle, And this is a candy cane killing. And she, yes, that's right boys, calm yourselves, she is in the Hetzer. Although to give it its proper title, it is of course the Jagdpanzer 38T, because this is a tank destroyer built on the chassis of what was, yes Akazuki, I'm telling them calm down, at the time, the obsolete. I'm telling them Akazuki, calm yourself. Seriously, women. Oh, I'm in for it now. Based on the chassis of what was at the time the obsolete Czechoslovakian Panzer 38T. Although, I mean, you know, there's obsolete and then there's obsolete. It depends who you're fighting, I believe. There was a leading German Tiger race, I think it might have been Otto Karius, who was the driver in a Panzer 38T during the Moscow offensive. But anyway, Candy here has armed her Hetzer with the 105mm derp gun, the good old howitzer. Not as effective as it used to be. I mean, we're going back a long, long time, but there was a time in World of Tanks where the amount of damage that you took from high explosive shells was not mitigated by your armour. So derp Hetzers, derp Shermans, machines like the T-14 tank destroyer. Oh dear. Yeah. They kind of ruled the roost down here at the lower tiers, but if you don't have any armour to begin with, it doesn't really matter that your armour now mitigates against high explosive damage. So yeah, the Su-76M over there never really stood much of a chance. There has been a lot of talk recently in World of Tanks about the very welcome, I have to say, hit point buff to vehicles from tiers 1 to 6. I mean, it's like Wargaming finally realised after 10 years that just getting 1 or 2 shotted isn't fun, and you don't learn anything if you're the victim of it. The only thing that you learn is, wow, this game sucks. That wasn't any fun. And so I think this has been a very welcome change overall, because people in lower tier vehicles are surviving that little bit longer, which gives them the opportunity to, well, learn a little bit more from their experiences. And I think it's also probably fair to say, and again, I don't have specific numbers or details here, it's just my gut feeling, that this hit point buff has made machines like the Derp Hetzer, machines that have howitzers, or just machines that have decent high explosive shells, a lot more fun to play as well, because suddenly there's an awful lot more health around for you to take off your victims. I also feel as if I'm actually starting to get my money's worth out of these 105mm high explosive shells, because while it never gets old one-shotting a target with the derp gun, I can't help but feel slightly cheated and that I deserve some kind of refund if I have a shell that does 350 average damage and I'm killing a target that only has 140 health. So I'm a big fan of these lower tier hit point changes, not just because it gives newbies a bit more of an opportunity to learn and get good, and also because you get sheer moments of unadulterated cackling glee like that when you shoot at a Marder 38T that now has 415 hit points and you've managed to one-shot it anyway. Now the KV-222 is a very different kettle of fish. That thing basically has the same hull armour as the KV-3. But he's on low health, and eventually it's going to die the same as anything else. Oh, Stug 3G, which has benefited from having its hit point pool increased to 460 from what I think was 350. But that extra health didn't appear to teach that guy the lesson that it's not a good idea to sit in front of a Hetzer on with a derp gun when you only have 7 health left. What can I say? I remain in favour of this hit point buff because it does give people at lower tiers the opportunity to survive a little longer and learn from their mistakes. Whether or not people are going to take advantage of that opportunity and actually learn from their mistakes, of course, is entirely down to them. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting both of these guys to still be alive in the time that it took Candy to get around behind the T-40. I thought for sure that at least one of them would have died to the other, but, well, no. Although, technically, you could argue that one of them did die to the other because the Stug's the one that got the kill, but either way, the T-40 isn't laughing about it. By the way, when Candy sent this replay in, the title went something along the lines of "See, girls can play World of Tanks too." Now, Candy, I don't mean to be condescending or patronising here, but I think you're preaching to the choir. I couldn't help but notice earlier that your Hetzer proudly sports the Brazilian flag. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that you're a female World of Tanks player who comes from a country where Portuguese is the native spoken language. Now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here and assume that you just weren't aware that for the last 5 years I have been living with a female World of Tanks player who's extremely good and comes from a country where Portuguese is the native spoken language. Because she's Portuguese. So, yeah, you don't need to... I know. Okay. Trust me, I get it. And I'm actually delighted to be able to share your replay with my audience, and not because you're a girl. I mean, that doesn't make any difference. Well, it shouldn't make any difference, but until we've evolved a little bit more as a species, I suspect it's going to continue to make a difference. But that's not the point. It's just, well, this was a great game to watch. I love lower tier battles, and it's not often that you actually see any kind of hint of skill in a low tier battle. But there was definitely some on display in this one. And not just that, as you pile straight through this building, well, yeah, that's going to save you from me, and he's not even facing the right way. God, I love this. But also because it was obvious how much fun you were having while you were playing this game. And that's always something that I'm happy to share with my audience, because there's too little fun in the world, especially these days, and the more of it I can spread around, well, the better. So thank you so much for sending this replay in. You clearly had a great time playing it, totally deserved the result that you got, and well done. And I think perhaps it's a testament to just how much lower tier tanks with derp guns like the Hetzer have been profiting from this low tier hit point buff, because that just rampage that you embarked upon, that unmitigated slaughter on Ensk, was only good enough for a first class mastery badge in the Hetzer. Some tough competition there, huh? Anyway, Candy, thank you for sending that one in. Also, Maniac 2000, thank you for sending in the earlier replay. Everybody else, I hope you enjoyed them, because that's it for today. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.